Welcome to ILTV on the hour. We are live here in Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines of the region. It's currently 7 a.m. in New York and 2 p.m. here in Israel. I'm Devo Klein, and here are the latest updates coming out of the region. U.S. Vice President JD Vance is due to leave Israel today after his two-day visit to discuss the Gaza ceasefire implementation and the advancement of Trump's Gaza peace plan. 3 hours after Vance's departure, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is due to land in Israel at the start of his two-day visit, also focusing on Gaza. Speaking to press ahead of his departure, Rubio had this to say.
It's important, in particular over the next couple of weeks, that we keep the ceasefire together. The Vice President is there now, and he'll be returning tomorrow and has great reports on the progress we made, but there's more work to be done, and we know that, so the first couple of weeks are going to be key. And then the work will begin of sort of building out the permanent process, of the going to the UN potentially and getting the international mandate, building the international defense security forces. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we certainly wanted to make sure that we were there and ensuring that we had the right people in place at the coordination center, which is key to holding this all together.
Now, Rubio's visit follows that of Vance, of Witkoff and Kushner, and even that of Trump himself, who was last in Israel just last week. Speaking on the consistency of administration visits to Israel, Rubio said this.
We think it's important for the first 7 to 10 days over the next week that we had senior level administration officials on the ground working to make sure this was all coming together. So obviously Steve and Jared have been there for most of the week. They've now moved to some other countries they've been meeting with in the region. The Vice President will be there through tomorrow, and then I'll have a chance to be there. But this is a big priority. This was a historic peace deal that President Trump delivered on, and now we have to make sure that it continues and that we continue to build upon it.
And while Secretary of State Rubio is en route to Israel, joining me now to discuss is Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, an expert on U.S.-Israel relations. Ambassador Ettinger, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So let's discuss Rubio's upcoming visit. As I mentioned, we've had quite a few visits from the Trump administration in recent weeks. Is this a sign, in your opinion, of strong relations between Israel and the United States? Or is Trump perhaps worried that Netanyahu has perhaps his own agenda and could potentially stray from his plan?
Well, recent months suggest that all commentaries about a rift between the two administrations, about President Trump turning his back on Israel, have been repudiated by reality, most notably the offensive against Iran, which took place contrary to the so-called experts. What we have seen is the normal relations, namely from 1948 until today. There has never been 100% agreement between the U.S. and Israel. There have always been point of disagreements between the two countries. The most fundamental question for the U.S. has always been, do ties with Israel advance or undermine American interest? And the reply to such a question is very obvious. Israel has been the number one, the most unique force multiplier, dollar multiplier for the U.S., and the $3.8 billion which the U.S. has annually invested in Israel, misperceived to be foreign aid, has yielded to the American taxpayer a return on investment of a few 100% year in and year out. And here, once again, there are some disagreements between the two administrations, and there is a very solid common denominator, specifically when it comes to Judea and Samaria. This has been traditionally an erroneous policy by the U.S. administration, disregarding the fact that a Palestinian state in west of the Jordan River in Judea and Samaria would undermine vital American interest, would be a death sentence to the pro-US Hashemite regime in Jordan, would transform Jordan into another a platform of anti-American Islamic terrorism, threatening the pro-American regimes in the Arabian Peninsula, and therefore, in my mind, for the sake of Israel's national security and for the sake of US own interests, Israel has to stick to its position that Judea and Samaria must be controlled by Israel, and no Palestinian state should be established there.
And we're actually going to touch on the issue of Judea and Samaria, which is quite the hot topic at this moment. But I do want to touch a little bit more on these visits, because they really are, at this point, back to back. So what is, the benefit of this for the Trump administration to focus so heavily on foreign policy at this point?
Well, obviously, the unknown elements are much heavier than the known elements. We don't know until this very day what has been actually decided between the president and the prime minister. However, my own private assessment is that, again, for the sake of the US, for the sake of the Middle East, I do hope that those visits to Israel do not focus on Gaza, because focusing on Gaza would resemble a driver driving in West Texas, smothered by a West Texas sandstorm, but being preoccupied with the tumbleweeds on the road. The issue of Hamas is a tumbleweed compared to the chief issue destabilizing the Middle East, generating war and terrorism throughout the entire world, all the way to Latin America and the US-Mexico border, which means the very rogue Ayatollah regime in Iran. My hope is that both the US and Israel are aware that while we speak here about Gaza, China, North Korea, probably Russia as well, are busy, preoccupied 24/7, restoring Iran's conventional ballistic air defense and nuclear capabilities. And that which we experienced in June here in Israel could be dwarfed if we, the US and Israel, do not preempt Iran at this stage, allowing them to restore their capabilities. The Ayatollah regime has no intention of leveraging negotiation for the sake of reconciliation. They are driven by a fanatic ideology. And that ideology, according to them, according to their school curriculum, mosque sermons, official media, and day-to-day action, that ideology mandates them to topple every single Sunni Arab regime, which they refer to as apostate regime, and then turn to the great American Satan. And for the US not to focus at this stage in the preemption of Iranian ballistic, conventional, and nuclear capabilities could severely undermine American interests, as, by the way, has the US policy towards Iran done for the last 48 years. For the last 48 years, presidential figures, Democrats and Republicans, have systematically embraced the diplomatic option and the economic sanction option, which has been a bonanza for the Ayatollah regime, transforming them from the American policemen of the Gulf to the #1 enemy of the US. I do not ignore the problem of Hamas in Gaza, but once again, that's a tumbleweed compared to the potential smothering sandstorms threatening the entire Middle East emanating from Tehran.
Right. I like your analogy there of the tumbleweeds. So in your assessment, it's actually should be the U.S.'s top priority right now to focus on foreign policy, if I understood correctly. But I want to ask you actually about the Abraham Accords, because Trump has expressed an immense desire to expand these Abraham Accords. In your opinion, are we close to normalization with additional countries like Saudi Arabia? And I'd like to add on that, just based off of what you said there, is this basically the race to kind of combat Iran and their influence in the region as well?
Well, for the sake of expansion of the Abraham Accord, as well as for the sake of President Trump's #1 goal, which is to end wars, not to start wars, the Ayatollah regime has to be dismantled completely. Ayatollah regime is the chief epicenter of wars and terrorism. How can you end wars and terrorism when you have the Ayatollah regime in power? How can you expand the Abraham Accords when the machete of the Ayatollah and the Muslim Brotherhood is at the throat of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, UAE, Bahrain, as well as Morocco? And therefore, once again, we're talking here about a very venomous octopus, and that octopus headquarters in Tehran. One of the one of the arms of that octopus happens to be in Gaza, but that's not the head of the octopus, which stands on the way of expanding the Abraham Accord and installing regional peace.
So, I really want to ask you about Qatar right before we wrap up. So where does Qatar stand with all of this? Because, the United States does have a close relationship with Qatar, and they seem to be keen to keep it that way. But Israel's relationship with Qatar is much more complicated than that. As you say, one of the tentacles of the Iranian regime is currently Hamas in Gaza, but Qatar is also influencing Hamas in Gaza. So how do you see Qatar in this whole situation? Is this a sticking point potentially in the future in U.S.-Israel relations?
Well, U.S. and Israeli policymakers have to make up their mind. Do they want to stick by the very, very frustrating Middle East reality, or do they prefer to engage with a much more convenient, much more peaceful and soluble alternate reality, which, among other things, presents Qatar as if it is not a bosom brother of the Ayatollah regime, as if it is not the #1 financial supporter of Islamic terrorism, as if it is not the #1 instigator of anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and anti-American events on American campuses. I think that for the sake of American interests as well as Israeli interests, embracing the frustrating reality is much better than engaging in wishful thinking while embracing alternate reality.
Wow, I wish we could go longer, but unfortunately we are out of time. But Ambassador Ettinger, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your crucial insights. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, my privilege.
And meanwhile, in Jerusalem, the Knesset has passed 2 opposition bills in the preliminary reading phase to apply Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. Now, one bill seeks to annex Ma'ale Adumim, that's an Israeli city southeast of Jerusalem, and the other covers all Judea and Samaria settlements. The vote for all settlements passed by a narrow margin of 25 to 24, this following a heated discussion in the Knesset. It will now be transferred to the Knesset's Foreign Affairs Affairs and Defense Committee, where it will need to be brought up for discussion before undergoing a second and third vote. That's the policy of the Knesset. The opposition claimed victory, saying they exposed divisions within the coalition, highlighting the deep political splits over Judea and Samaria annexation. But the vote was conducted at the same time as the visit of JD Vance to Israel, a move that Netanyahu strictly opposed. According to reports, Netanyahu is striving to achieve Israeli sovereignty, but only with the backing of Washington. An unlikely occurrence at this point in time, as Marco Rubio commented also on this issue of the bill. Take a listen.
What do you make of the Israeli parliament moving forward on potential annexation of the West Bank? Right as
well, that's a vote in there. Yeah, that's a vote in the Knesset. But obviously, I think the president's made clear that's not something we'd be supportive of right now, and we think it's even threatening to the peace deal. So, they're a democracy. They're going to have their votes. People are going to take these positions. But at this time, it's something that we think it might be counterproductive.
Now, this bill has no operational or legislative consequences just yet. But joining me now to discuss is Aviv Bushinsky, the former media advisor and chief of staff to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Aviv, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So let's start off with the most pressing issues right now, which are JD Vance's comments coming out of this recent Knesset vote to pass these bills, the first votes on the annexation of Judea and Samaria. He said that he was hurt by them. That's a personal reference, and it actually kind of takes me back to comments made by U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who said in an interview to CBS's 60 Minutes that they felt betrayed from the Israeli strikes in Doha. So this is kind of going back to the rifts between the U.S. and Israel. But, you know, what do you make of these recent developments from JD Vance?
Yeah, it's not only a matter of manners or if someone was offended and they were offended. I'm going back to, I think, what President Trump recently said, that Israel will not, that's what he said, will not annex Judea, the West Bank. He even said the West Bank. He didn't even say Judea and Samaria. And this is a 100% contradiction to what Netanyahu said and promised. It was part of his campaign in 2020. He said it in 2019, and he even said it prior to his recent visit to the States, when he said that he will promote the intents or the intentions of annexing Judea and Samaria, and he even said that he will do it gradually. So this is a big, big slap in the face, not only to the American administration, the way it was presented, but way, way more to the Israeli government, that this is part of their agenda. So it means that as for now, or maybe forever, Israel will not be able to contemplate its plan or its intentions to annex the West Bank, and this is a big blow for Netanyahu. So I think that exceeds anything that goes to the timing of trying to pass this bill, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Now, these votes for both bills of annexation were quite heated in the Knesset. There was a lot of uproar on this. Can you explain a little bit why Israeli lawmakers are so divided on the matter of sovereignty?
I think that now everybody has the sense or smell the upcoming elections, and now the different parties need to regain their agenda, if I can say, especially the far right that kind of being dragged by Netanyahu all the time, threatened Netanyahu that they're going to resign, that they're going to dissolve the Knesset, and did nothing. So now each party has its own agenda or tries to rebuild or retain its agenda. It goes from the far right, like Bezalel Smotrich, that even said today something, a very, very harsh statement, if I may say, even very close to racism. He said that if part of the deal with Saudi Arabia, the normalization, will be recognizing a Palestinian state, so the Saudi Arabians should go back and ride their camels. That's what he said. So I think that now everybody is, the rhetoric is way, way stronger, way extreme. You can see even Shas party that today said that they're going to resign from the different portfolio in the Knesset and decide and will have a freedom to decide which vote to be in favor or against. So I think that the train has left its station. We are getting closer and closer to elections, and that's why Netanyahu's coalition, I'm not saying that it's tearing apart, but it is very close to collapse.
Interesting. So you're actually saying that, Shas's announcement today of quitting their coalition responsibilities, in your opinion, if I understood correctly, has more to do with finding the identity of the party than actually passing the law?
Exactly.
For the draft, bill, of course.
Yeah, the
Sorry.
draft law. Yeah, exactly. There's no way Netanyahu will be able to deliver a law in which there'll be sanctions on the ones who run away or don't serve in the IDF or just drop their drafting bills down the drain. I don't see any scenario that the religious parties will agree to that, and therefore we're getting very, very close to elections. And I think that Netanyahu also understood it. From my understanding is that the most likely or the ultimate date, even for Netanyahu under the circumstances, will be somewhere in June. And you see, as I said, you can hear the rhetoric, you can see what Shas is doing, what Bezalel Smotrich is saying, what happened yesterday with the annexation, and even a maybe insignificant event in which Yuli Edelstein decided to support the ones who are against Netanyahu. It's part of the ordeal that the Knesset and especially Netanyahu's government is going to go through. Therefore, it's for Netanyahu, it's inevitable. And in order not to be dragged to elections, I think that he'll understand that he'll have to take the initiative, decide upon the date, and go for it, hoping that he'll be able to deliver. I'm quite doubtful deliver a total victory, as he claimed, on Hamas, but at least, and this is at least, expanding the Abraham Accord, starting with Saudi Arabia. If Netanyahu will be able to deliver this, he'll have something tangible to show to his potential supporters. Otherwise, the situation is very bad.
You say that otherwise the situation is very bad. Do you think that, if we do go for another cycle of elections and Netanyahu's Likud party, the inner rifts inside the party continue, they persist, and, he doesn't make it back into the position of prime minister, do you think that could jeopardize the future efforts of the Abraham Accords, this close relationship that we have with the United States?
It's true that Netanyahu best chip or best card in the future elections, as I say, they said that Truman once said that if you want a friend in the White House, get a dog. Netanyahu can say that he has the best friend in the White House, and his friend name is Donald. So Netanyahu say, you'll vote for me, you'll get extension of the Abraham Accord because my buddy is Donald Trump, and Donald Trump may not trust the others. I don't know if this suffices. I don't know if this is the winning chip for Netanyahu, but reality shows that at the moment, neither the coalition nor the opposition have the majority. And in order to get to the majority again for Netanyahu, he'll need to pull a real trick from his sleeve, because still there is the debate upon his responsibility for October 7th, the National Inquiry Committee, on the one hand, and on the other side, what Netanyahu achieved since October 7th and what Netanyahu will promise his people from now on. And this is the big debate. So if Netanyahu will see that he cannot do anything, not with a draft law, not extending the Abraham Accord, then as I mentioned, his political situation is, if I can say, not so comfortable.
Not so comfortable indeed. And, we're really almost out of time, but just briefly, I do want to ask you a little bit about your opinion. If we do go back to another cycle of elections, are you confident in Netanyahu? He has, a very dedicated, base of voters. Do you think that they can pull through this time around and get him back in there?
Netanyahu is a very, very good campaigner, and if the opposition, for instance, will stick to one agenda, saying inquiry committee, then Netanyahu at the last minute will say, you know what, let's go for it, and then it will take out some air out of the balloon that the opposition is trying to pump. And if you see that the other side, especially Benny Gantz and Lieberman, that today had some kind of a debate between themselves, if they'll be, it won't be so coherent and will not go as a one block, then Netanyahu's situation at the moment is way stronger. Don't forget that in the last couple of years, Netanyahu has something that others don't have. He has the Bibistim, the ones who support Netanyahu automatically. This is a very, very unique situation. When I was working with Netanyahu, we never experienced it. And you can see the best example. They're going to have a primary elections who will nominate the leader of the Likud party. And I think that it is for the first time in the Likud history that no one is running against the leader of the Likud. In other words, Netanyahu is running against himself. So you see how solid his situation within the right wing and especially in the Likud party.
Absolutely. Well, we are unfortunately out of time, but Avi Bushinsky, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And the World Court is now demanding that Israel work with Unrwa, the UN relief agency that is supposed to help Palestinian refugees in the Gaza Strip. Although Israel knows of Unrwa being compromised, the ICJ is now claiming that Israel had not provided enough evidence to support the claim that Unrwa workers doubled as Hamas terrorists. They took part in the October 7th massacre. Israel banned Unrwa from operating on Israeli soil after accusing some staff of participating in the massacre. But the investigation conducted to support Israel's claim had been only deemed as a, quote, neutrality-related issue. Clearly, the stockpiles of weapons found inside UNRWA buildings, the tunnel shafts openings located by the IDF near UNRWA facilities, testimony of return hostage Emily Damari, who said her captors held her inside a UN building, and mountains of evidence supplied by the NGO UN Watch did not suffice for the ICJ to make their ruling. Not even the video of an UNRWA worker kidnapping the body of murdered 21-year-old Yonatan Samirano into Gaza on October 7th, after he was brutally and indiscriminately shot by Hamas. To the ICJ, I say we don't and we haven't forgotten about Yonatan. And working with UNRWA after what had happened on that dark morning is simply inconceivable. And now, let's hear a quick message from our partners at Efrat. Take a listen.
That doesn't suit you.
I'm telling you what's right for you.
Listen to me, I know what I'm talking about.
Feels uncomfortable? That's just about clothing, something you can change tomorrow. But what about choices that last a lifetime? In Israel, over 30,000 women every year feel that their most fundamental right is taken away. The ability to choose. Financial pressure, pressure from a partner, pressure from family, or even that quiet voice whispering, "You can't do this." That's why Efrat exists. Not to tell her what to do, not to choose for her, but to isolate the pressure, to enable a true free choice, whether it's emotional support, medical guidance, personal mentoring, career counseling, parenting education, or the most practical essentials. A crib, a stroller, clothes, diapers, baby supplies, food packages, everything she needs to make the choice she wants instead of the choice she feels forced to make. More than 89,000 women have already found the strength to choose and give birth. But it's not enough. We must give every woman the ability to choose. It is our moral and ethical duty. Every donation gives another woman the ability to choose. Every act of support means life for someone else. Efrat, giving hope to birth.
And the IDF confirmed in the last hour that military fighter jets are striking Hezbollah positions in the Bekaa region in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah continues attempts to rebuild on the border with Israel, this in clear violation of the U.S. brokered cessation in fighting signed in November of last year. And that is a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. I am Devo Klein. Thanks so much for joining us, but don't forget to scan that QR code to download our app for more updates. Take care.